Have you ever looked up at the stars and wondered, is all of this really just an accident? Or is something or someone behind it all? Maybe you're convinced God exists. Maybe you're convinced he doesn't. Or maybe you're just not sure yet. Because whether God exists may be the most important question we'll ever ask. If he's real, everything changes. So, how can we know? Welcome to Teach My Heart, where we explore faith questions with curiosity and humility in order to know God more deeply. And today we're asking, how can we know God exists? When people ask whether God exists, they often think faith and reason are opposites, that you either believe because of evidence or you believe because there isn't any. But the Catholic Church has always taught that faith and reason work together. The Catechism puts it this way: created in God's image and called to know and love Him, the person who seeks God discovers certain ways of coming to know Him. Some of those ways come through reason. By reflecting on creation and on the human person, we begin to see that God exists. But reason can only take us so far. God doesn't just want us to know that He exists, He wants us to know Him. So He reveals Himself to us. Let's begin by looking at creation. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a sense of awe? The psalmist certainly did. The heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament proclaims the work of his hand. The universe is vast, beautiful, ordered, and surprisingly understandable. The laws of physics behave consistently. The earth exists within a narrow range of conditions that make life possible. The more we learn about the universe, the more remarkable it appears. Now, none of this proves that God exists in a scientific or mathematical sense, but many people have looked at the order and complexity of creation and concluded that it points beyond itself. Some scientists have even noted how finely tuned many aspects of the universe appear to be for life to exist. And while people disagree about what it means, it raises an important question. Why is there something rather than nothing? And why is the universe ordered in a way that can be understood? One possible explanation is that there is a creator behind it all. In fact, the Book of Wisdom teaches us that creation itself can lead us toward knowledge of God. It says, from the greatness and beauty of created things comes a corresponding perception of their creator. Or, to put it another way, when we see a masterpiece, we naturally assume there is an artist. So, when we encounter creation, it's reasonable to consider that there is a creator. And just like creation points beyond itself, perhaps the human person does too. Think about what makes us unique. We can reason, we can seek truth, we can create art, we can ask questions about meaning, purpose, and existence itself. And across cultures, people generally recognize that murder is wrong, protecting children is good, and justice matters. Perhaps that's because we were created in the image and likeness of God. The Catechism says, man's openness to truth and beauty, his sense of moral goodness, his freedom, and the voice of his conscience, all these are signs of his spiritual soul. There is something about being human that points beyond mere biology. We are physical beings, but we are also capable of things that seem to transcend matter alone. It's reasonable then to consider that we were made for something greater. Creation and the human person can tell us a great deal about God. They can lead us to reasonably conclude that a creator exists, but they can't tell us everything about him. For that, God has to reveal himself. The church calls this divine revelation, God making himself known to humanity. Throughout the Old Testament, God gradually reveals who he is. He speaks to Abraham, Isaac, Moses, inviting them into a covenant relationship. In Exodus, when Moses asks God his name, God replies, I am who I am. At first, this might sound like a strange answer, and if we're not careful, we can almost hear it with a little bit of attitude. I am who I am. But that's not what's happening here. God isn't irritated or brushing Moses off. He's revealing something profound about himself. Unlike everything else in creation, God wasn't created. He has no beginning and no end. He simply is. He is the one who always was, always is, and always will be. And because God's very nature never changes, neither do his truths, his promises, nor his love for his people. The God who spoke to Moses is the same God who is present with us today. But God doesn't reveal himself just so we know about him. He reveals himself because he wants us to know him. That revelation has been handed down through sacred scripture and sacred tradition and is authentically interpreted by the magisterium. And it reaches its fullness in Jesus Christ. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. So, how can we know God exists? The Catholic answer is a combination of faith and reason. Creation points beyond itself, the human person points beyond himself, but God doesn't leave us to figure it out alone. He reveals himself throughout history. His revelation is handed on through sacred scripture and sacred tradition, and most fully, he reveals himself in Jesus Christ. The question then may not simply be whether God exists. The question may be whether we're willing to follow the evidence where it leads. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Teach My Heart. If it helped you get to know God just a little bit more, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode where we ask, what's a saint? Until then, keep seeking understanding.